Espero que tenham tido um ótimo almoço. Vamos recomeçar a sessão da tarde com uma keynote speech da Dany Louise, do Interpretation Matters. Vai-nos falar sobre Are You Talking to Me? Writing for a Diverse Audience. Eu acho fabuloso o trabalho da Louise. A Louise é escritora e é obcecada por algo que todos nós devíamos ser, diria eu, que é o uso preciso da linguagem, da língua e da linguagem, mas o uso preciso da língua, e centra o seu trabalho em duas áreas muito interessantes, as artes visuais e a política cultural, o que nos interessa bastante aqui neste contexto desta nossa conferência anual. A Dany já trabalhou para o Arts Council inglês e neste momento trabalha com organizações culturais em projetos estratégicos, aconselhando-os sobre a forma de comunicar melhor a sua identidade aos visitantes. Portanto, o palco é seu, Dany Louise.
Thank you for the nod there. Oh, can you hear me? Is this on? Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here, and many, many thanks to Maria Vlachou and all the committee. It's an absolute pleasure and a privilege, actually, and I've listened to the morning's debates and talks with great interest, and I very, very much hope that I can add something worthwhile to the debate. I guess I have something of a UK-based, a British-based perspective, and it will be interesting to hear from you whether that resonates with you here in Portugal or on what I call the continent, or whether we have a lot in common in this subject matter, or whether my perspective is very different. So please do speak up and let me know. To set the scene, I thought I would start with some examples of bad art writing. I mostly write about the visual arts and cultural policy. I know a lot of you are from museums and work in a museum context, and in Britain we pretty much separate out museums from art galleries, or when we refer to museums we tend to think of it as a place showing artefacts, historical artefacts, and perhaps historical art, and we think of galleries as showing, on the whole, contemporary art. So I really come from a contemporary art perspective, but I'm aware that a lot of you here come from a much more museological perspective. And I think that's quite interesting. I'm going to try and be aware of this and tailor what I say to make it relevant to you. In Britain, the examples I give are based around contemporary art, but I think in Britain the museum sector generally does better about writing for the public, for public communication, public education, than the contemporary art sector does. But I also think there's still quite a long way to go in the UK in both ways. So I would characterise the key issues, in my opinion, in Britain to be the contemporary art sector overcomplicates, but the museum sector oversimplifies. So that's, and really I think both are kind of as bad as each other. You might disagree, I don't know. But what I thought I'd do, because I write about the arts quite a lot, I get sent an awful lot of press releases and invitations to exhibitions. So I thought it would be interesting to look back on the last 2 or 3 weeks of emails that I had and review the language I've been presented with, either as part of a press release or from the exhibition itself or from the artist as well. And I didn't have to look back very far, frankly. I didn't have to trawl through 100 emails to find you some entertaining examples. I basically looked through about 10 emails and thought, oh, I'd better stop there. I've only got 30 minutes. So for your entertainment and to make my point, I'm starting off with what I consider to be some of the most difficult language and the poorest communication that I've been sent at the point when I wrote this presentation, which is about, 10 days ago, something like that. And I stress that these are real life examples. So, number one. And I am naming and shaming, as you can see. So this is... They're all UK examples, so thankfully no one, I hope, attached to or associated with any of the institutions is in the audience, so that's why I'm being brave. So this is from the Liverpool Biennial, and I'll read it out for you. Award-winning artist Adam Linder presents Choreographic Service Number 4, Some Strands of Support, a choreography for hair prostheses in which a designated object, sculpture or statue is cared for and coerced through the movement of hair. For this performance, Liverpool Biennial has hired 3 days of hair care for a statue of Apollo Soroktonos, it's even hard to pronounce, which is part of the, well, if you're not Greek, Maria could do that better, which is part of the Ancient Greece episode exhibited at Tate, Liverpool. So I'm just going to throw this open now. Does anyone want to comment on this wonderful statement? Why have I picked this passage to share with you? Any volunteers? Anyone want to tell me what their first quick response is? Anyone? I can do the teacher thing and point at someone if you want. Are you all being shy? Yeah? Oh, a long sentence did I have over there? Yes, thank you very much. It is a long sentence. One sentence is actually 37 words long. That's quite a long sentence. The other sentence, there's only 2 sentences actually, and the other sentence is 29 words long. You're quite right, that's long sentences. Why are long sentences bad?
We get lost.
You get lost, yeah. And any other reason? Why do you get lost? Yeah, too many ideas in one sentence. Thank you, that's brilliant. Okay, and someone else over here said something, was very brave and said something. Oh, no, actually, I don't think it did come with an image. It might have come with an image of a statue, but not much of an image. Yeah. Okay, does anyone know what hair prostheses are? Hands up if you do. Oh, okay, thank you. It's more than I knew. And hands up if you didn't. I know English is not necessarily your first language. Okay, so that's quite a few. Well, a few of you did and quite a few of you don't. I didn't. I had to look it up. And it didn't help because it said something like extensions. Okay, in the Oxford English Dictionary. Okay. How many people here care that Adam Linder is an award-winning artist? Is that important to know in this context, do you think?
Depends on the award.
Depends on your...
Maybe it will depend on the award, not any award.
Oh, on the award. Yeah. Okay, yep, okay. Why do you think it's included?
To give relevance to the
Okay, to give relevance, I've had over here, which we'll come back to, and someone over here said to validate.
the option of choosing him
Yeah,
as an artist.
okay. So I think that's related to the idea of relevance. Who is this passage aimed at? Do you know? The boss, yes. Some cynicism there, well done. The thing is, this is sent out as a marketing email to people who are interested in the Liverpool Biennial but who are not necessarily arts professionals. So why, first of all, does someone who's never heard of this artist before, does it validate them to someone who's never heard of him? And secondly, is it relevant? I'm not sure it is relevant. I mean, it's debatable, but personally I thought it wasn't. But Okay, you can see there's a lot in this, isn't there? I've got another 3 points, and I'm sure I haven't got that much time and a few more, so I shall quickly go on. But the phrase, care for and coerced through the movement of hair, what does that mean? I don't know. To me, it sounded like a quote from a piece of art criticism, rather than natural, everyday language. And this is a marketing email, so this is not taken from an art magazine. This is not taken from a review. So I'm not sure that I have a problem with this phrase, but an ordinary member of the public would sort of read that and feel either informed or particularly excited about what was going on, or necessarily understand it. Does it actually give us an idea of what will happen? Does it entice you to make you want to see it? And what is the ancient Greece episode? I happen to know what it is. It's part of the curatorial theme, but actually that wasn't explained in the email as a whole. So, and does that matter to the reader? Again, not sure. So there's, in my opinion, but I think you pretty much are agreeing, there's an awful lot wrong with this, and it's 60 words long, and I could almost write an essay about what this language is doing and where it's coming from, and perhaps why, again, in my opinion, it isn't fit for purpose. I'm going to give you another example. Actually, it's from the same press release. Should I be a bit quicker? We'll be here all day, but so this is a conference, and you might want to compare this to the wording that went out with the publicity for this conference, which is about access to culture, which I think was fantastically intelligible, fantastically straightforward. So this is about a conference that Liverpool Biennial has organised. This conference gathers researchers, curators, artists and writers to explore the biennial form as the site for the production of contemporaneity in art and exhibition making. How does the transnational biennial format organise the world as an amalgamation of different cultures operating episodically across times and places in the dynamic relation between the local and the universal? How and for whom do these biennials operate? Under what conditions? Okay. Anyone else? Oops, sorry. Anyone else want to comment on that one? From this side of the hall, perhaps. Any ideas? Any instant responses? You're not going to be wrong. I'm not marking you. Okay, so again, it's a very long, there's one very long sentence in there of 31 words. Yeah. A lot of long words with many syllables. Contemporaneity, amalgamation, episodically, dynamic relation. There's probably simpler ways of saying the same thing, isn't there? Perhaps. Does it sound impressive? No? Oh, yes. Yes, it sounds impressive. Does it sound that it communicates, though? It sounds exclusive. Okay, exclusive to whom? Yeah, but exclusive to people, first of all, who understand English to a high level, perhaps, maybe to academics, maybe highly educated people. Yeah, but not to common people, ordinary people. Yeah. It could be the case, but should it be the case? And in fact, it is taking place in a university. Oh, sorry, someone there. Yes.
If you aim to a specific audience,
yes.
Imagine researchers, artists, and people from the arts field.
Yes.
Doesn't it's fairer, for me it's more fair that you do this than that you create a simpler and clearer language, but then in the end you're not aiming to everybody.
I do hear what you say.
You
yes.
can feel that this is aimed to a specific target.
Yeah. I think that would be its defence. But, I mean, as someone who, I have an MPhil, and I've been a little bit in the academic world. I had a supervisor who, I had several supervisors who we all agreed that actually, even though you're an academic, you don't necessarily have to overcomplicate things or make things sound impressive and use academic language. You can, but actually, if you really want to communicate knowledge, perhaps you shouldn't. And again, it's a debate, but my own thought is that the biennial is publicly funded for quite a lot of money a year, and perhaps it should try to be a little bit more broad-based. And I do think maybe that last sentence, I sometimes get annoyed at hypocrisy, and or what I see as hypocrisy, and I think, you know, how and for whom do these biennials operate, under what conditions? For whom is the key thing, isn't it? There. And I get the sense it's not for, you know, did someone use the phrase earlier, didn't they? That some writing or some events or some activity is focused on feedback of their peers rather than communication. And I think this is maybe a case in point. I'm going to do this really quickly. It was a terrible email, I'm sorry. So, celebrating the 60th anniversary of Guy Debord's theory of the derive, 1956, artist Marcos Lutyens invites you to wander through the streets of Liverpool in a heightened state of consciousness. This experience will place special emphasis on the unconscious links and cues that participants feel and yet rarely come to the surface. The exercise is a dynamic reading of Liverpool's social spaces and projected histories. Again, who is it aimed at? And it is a marketing email. I do say that it's not, it has gone out to a broad range of people, this email. I would say not the average resident of Liverpool and not even the average art enthusiast. I've got a Bachelor of Arts degree, I've got a Master of Arts degree, and, sorry if I sound like I'm boasting, I have a Master of Philosophy degree. I have no familiarity at all with Guy Debord's theory of the derive. I don't understand it. I'm highly educated. Who else is going to understand it? And also, I wonder if I am the only person who is uncomfortable being told that I feel unconscious links and cues that the artist has some special power to bring to the surface. Okay, so there you go. So that's all from one press release. I don't know who wrote it in the biennial organisation, but I am a bit surprised it was sent out. Generally, its aim was to entice people interested in art, interested in the biennial, to go to these events. The question to ask yourself, if you're writing marketing materials, if you're writing labels, if you're writing wall panels, if you're writing press releases, does it work? Does it actually do the job you want it to do? It's a really important question. I wonder if the person who wrote this asked that question. Would your mother go to whatever it is, having written whatever you've written? Would your cousin go? Would your sister or your brother go? These are the kinds of questions I think you have to ask. Okay, here's an example from an exhibition in Hastings. It was an exhibition of 21 artists from Berlin who had been invited to come to Hastings, where I live, which is on the south coast of England, to participate in an arts festival. And the work was really good. Again, on the whole, I thought it was a great exhibition. Here's another example of a label accompanying an artwork. The democratization of technology has offered us the possibility of spreading and sharing knowledge, and that equals empowerment. Knowledge is power, power to unfold, fight, and direct your own life. The world we live in nowadays is a world in which ideas and information disseminate rapidly and reveal themselves in this infinite, accumulative, unfolding, looping process. You have the feeling of being devoured by this infinite swirl of information black hole. But the power of the internet and its sharing capabilities have improved exponentially not only our access to knowledge, but also our perception, communication, and expression capabilities. This has given way to a new kind of human species. So this is really different in tone. Does anyone want to comment on this one? Okay. So a comment here is that it's very well written. Would you like to say why? Yeah?
I can relate to it.
Yeah.
There are some terms that are not probably the everyday usage of English language, but
Yeah.
I do relate with them. I
Okay.
don't know if I'm the audience for that specific exhibition,
Mhm.
but it seems well written.
Yeah.
Although it has some words that could be needing some explanation, probably.
Yeah.
But for me, it's well written, I suppose.
Thank you. Okay, that's good. It is understandable, isn't it? Yeah. Any other comments on it?
I wonder if you have to try and be creative in writing.
Mm.
Really, you are supposed just to be more straightforward in what you want to say.
I think this is an attempt to be more creative, I agree. And I also think, are you familiar with the phrase horses for courses? You know, that I think there isn't one size fits all. I think sometimes you should be straightforward, sometimes it's not so necessary, or you can try different things. I don't think there's any one way of writing labels. What does it tell us about the artwork, by the way? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you don't know, this is a label by an artwork, you don't actually know much about the artwork, having looked at this, I agree, thank you.
But it's also true that if it is a label,
Yeah,
it's because it's next to the object that it relates to.
yes.
It's not necessarily a bad thing that it...
Maria, queres falar no microfone porque temos pessoas a acompanhar em live streaming? Não conseguem ouvir.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a problem if that text has to be next to the object that it relates to.
Yes.
So the fact that it complements, it adds information,
Mm.
it can be a good thing. I don't see that as a problem.
Okay.
In here, yes, because we don't know anything.
It may or it may not complement it, I think is the answer, you know. But I think this one is perhaps not so bad, but I think there are, to me it sounds like an excerpt from an essay that isn't directly related to the art. It's more about the artist's thought processes, perhaps. It's if you're academic, you can deconstruct it. You can sort of look at the rhetoric of it and think that it doesn't quite make sense. It makes leaps of logic. But I think, to me, the main thing is it is a long sentences again, perhaps too many ideas, not particularly well argued, and actually it doesn't really tell us about the artwork. And you're right, maybe I should have put the image there and you could have decided that for yourself. So that's something I've learned for the future. Thank you. Was there a gentleman over there who
I just
wanted to
also
say
like to
something?
say that it's a long period saying just one idea about technology
Yes.
and the effects of technology in everyday life.
Yeah.
But I also think there's a responsibility when you end up sentences like this saying this has given way to a new kind of human species.
Yeah.
Who am I to tell this? Like, what is to a new kind of human species? That's too exaggerated for a text that complements an artwork.
It's a big claim. I think this text was written by the artist, and artists often it's not necessarily their strength to write about their own work, and it is a skill to write a label accompanying an artwork, I think. I'm just aware of time, so I'm going to move on a little bit. Yeah, here's another one. I think I might just, it's a similar one to the previous one. I think I might just skip over this one. It's it could be better written, let's just put it that way. And this one is from a gallery in Wales called Oriel Mostyn Gallery. The artists, this is a press release, by the way, but it's designed to try and get people in the press to go up to visit it and to review it, or to at least see it, and probably to get funders to go and, people who are considered to be important to go and see the exhibition. The artists, who only met last year during an exchange project, have been working together over the course of 2016 to explore a number of shared ideas. These concerns are realised in work that explores the position and experience of the insider and outsider, using testbed to challenge ideas through drawings, paintings, exchange and objects, parallel walking, mapping of locations and other actions and works. They chose the Skirrid Mountains as their site of investigation to unpick what it means to feel familiar and unfamiliar with a place and the potential disturbance or disruption to this. Again, any comments? Anyone want to? Now you've learned, the skill of critique. Does anyone who maybe hasn't said anything yet want to say something on this one? Yes?
What is this test?
Absolutely, I don't know, but it's a good question. Thank you, and it isn't explained. Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah. That's true. Yep. Yep. Anything else from anyone? Yeah, again, so it's a bit non-specific, isn't it, I think? And again, another very long sentence, 38 words long, it's our longest sentence yet. And then also, and this is something as I go a bit further on, because I'm pointing out bad writing, but I'm going to go on to what is good writing. One of the things that I'm going to go on to say is actually knowing how to edit what you write is really, really important, and to question yourself, is every bit of information that you include worthy of being included? Is it useful to include? And what jumped out at me was the artists who only met last year during an exchange project. Do we need to know that? I'm not sure. I mean, it's a nice to know thing, but it adds to this kind of volume of verbiage that is kind of, it's not an important thing to know, and therefore it takes away from what might be important to know. Yeah, but a press release, it's even more important. Who writes press releases here? Quite a lot of you. Okay. Yeah, what goes into a press release is so important, because you have no idea how many press releases a journalist receives every single day. And, you've got to grab the journalist's attention in half a second, 1 second at most. The 1.5 seconds later, when you hit they only been met last year during exchange project, you've gone on to the next one. You've deleted. You've lost the journalist's attention. It's really important to be absolutely to the point and concise. Journalists are very, very busy people. They have a lot of volume to get through. Seriously.
Can I also say?
Oh, yes, sorry.
What I feel especially in Portuguese, because it's much faster for me to recognize it, is that we are all, or there are lots of us writing the same formulas. Things like to explore a number of shared ideas, I heard 100 times, or what was it? Challenge. Challenge is a key word. So what I feel, and that it is boring and tiring already, because the same different projects are explained and described with the same formulas, and they are gastas. They are already too used, that they crystallized already in clichés. So they don't give me new information.
Yes.
And then Maria talked about being creative while you are writing. You don't have to write a poem or you don't have to make philosophy. Just also not to use once again the same formula that does not add anything anymore. Not curiosity, not, oh, this makes me think. Just this.
I completely agree, and I think it's one of, in my mind, it's one of the signs, the use of cliché is one of the signs of bad writing or inexperienced writing. It's one of the things that I judge. If I'm trying to decide, am I interested in this exhibition, whatever it happens to be, whether it's a leaflet, a piece of print, an email, a press release, how it's written, how it's presented to me, informs my judgment of what the work is going to be like, and really contributes a lot to whether I'm going to go and see it. So that might be unfair on the artists, but it is the truth, and it's the case, I think, and maybe the case for more people. I mean, I'm a professional, but it's probably the case for people who are not professional as well. You've got to try and... It's hard, I'm not saying it's easy, but that's the thing about communication. You have to try and excite people somehow. This is one of my... I go into this. This is one of my pet hates. I don't know if that phrase translates well into Portuguese. I rant about this on a regular basis, and in fact I've ranted about it in my book, as well as the word challenge. There's a section in here saying, are you challenging preconceived ideas? And there's also a section, which I shall show you in a minute, about private views. So I'm a big fan. I think on the continent you have this wonderful word called vernissage, which I believe translates as opening. And it's for an art exhibition, but it's also perhaps for a museum show. And it says what it does on the tin. It is an opening. In Britain, still in the 21st century, we use the term private view, and too much. Some people don't use it, but it's still used a lot. I get a lot of invitations to private views, and here's one of the latest ones. You can see it's very current. I didn't have to go far into my inbox to find an example to show you. To me, vernissage is much more egalitarian. Are you familiar with that word? It's, she says, and of course it kind of originates here, doesn't it? If we take a few moments to unpick the phrase private view, we can understand what it means. So, first of all, it's private. It's an exclusive event for selected people that the organisers choose to invite. That's just there in one word, isn't it? And that means that the vast majority of people who, because we have a class system in Britain, are, the riffraff, they're not welcome. Most people are not welcome. It's private for people we think are important or rich. And it has its origins in the class and the wealth and the culture system of 19th century England, when rich people acted as patrons for artists and invited all their friends, literally all their peers, all the aristocracy, to openings of exhibitions to show off their kind of pet artist, but also to try and sell the works. So it invited people with money. And people are still using that in this day and age, and I think it's because artists and unfortunately quite a large number of curators want to buy into the idea of art for the privileged few. But they won't admit to that, and you quite often get invitations to private views that then in the text say, And the artist challenges the preconceived ideas of something or other, or maybe doesn't even explain what ideas are being challenged, but tries to give some idea of radicalism while using this completely, in my view, obsolete phrase. And it's not questioned very much in Britain. The University of Brighton uses it all the time. Big institutions still use it. And I'm stunned at that. Given the arts and artists and the cultural sector are fantastic at arguing. They're fantastic at talking. They're fantastic at thinking things through, at being complicated. And this is such a simple thing. And it I think it's something to do with just this subconscious need to belong, to feel recognised, to be validated, to all those things that actually we don't really admit to. It's not accepted to admit to. And it's like a blind spot, I think. I don't know, I guess that's peculiar to Britain, because you have the wonderful Vernissage, which I wish we could have much more. Okay, so there you are. You see, I told you I rant about it, and I have just ranted. And there you go. There's the rant in print. Right. Yes, and the other thing I want to say is that when I go on this rant and just talk about language generally, almost everyone, all the professionals that I speak to agree with me. Almost everyone says, yeah, writing for the public is really quite bad, but not one person has ever admitted to me that they do it, as in that they do it badly. But someone is putting this stuff out. There are people putting this stuff out. I haven't had to look very hard to find it. So I'm going to leave that thought with you there. I think a degree of self-knowledge is required, perhaps. Okay. So this is a little bit of self-promotion here. Forgive me. I hope it's not too overt and blatant. But I've explored these questions from a variety of different perspectives in my book, The Interpretation Matters Handbook, which is here. And I did bring a few copies with me. And I've tried to explore it from different perspectives of curators, of people, the education departments, of the marketing department, and from artists, from myself, etc., and from the academic perspective as well. It's too much to go into now, and I'm probably running really short on time. So, I'm really interested in this conference theme of so what? And I'm just, actually, you know what, I probably don't have time for this section. I've just been told it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Okay, so, but I was thinking of that conference theme of so what, which is a really, really good question to ask yourself. And Maria said to me, that's a question I ask myself all the time. It reminded me of a story I've never told in public, but I think it's relevant. So many, 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 many years ago, I trained as a painter. And following my graduation, I experimented with lots of different types of arts projects. And on one occasion, I had the opportunity to take part in a weekend-long music festival. And in this event, myself and another artist accompanied a live band by painting to the music on large sheets of chipboard, sort of near the stage. And I had a really great time being very childish and expressing myself and generally being quite gleeful and throwing paint around. And afterwards, I enthused about this to my sister, and she didn't get it. And she was the first person to ever say to me, but why? Which is kind of the so what question. And I couldn't answer her. I just didn't have the words to get across that, in my view, it didn't matter why, it was worth it for the experience in itself, and it didn't really have a point. But when I think about it in retrospect, I realise that up till then I'd been really closeted for several years with arts people. The whole time during my degree, we never asked ourselves why. Why are we doing this? It was taken for granted. The arts are important and worthwhile and essential. we didn't have to justify ourselves. And that was the unspoken way of thinking, and I carried that with me for a long time. So my reaction to my sister was actually one of scorn and superiority. I thought I was better than her because I understood better than her. I was more enlightened than her. And I was quite cross too because I'd been challenged. But at no point did I think, that's a good question. She's got a point there. And I can see now that it's a form of arrogance and ignorance and immaturity. But I actually think in the arts, in our education system, at least in the UK, that's kind of how we're educated to think. And perhaps as professionals, we try to get out of that way of thinking. We have to get out of that way of thinking, especially if you work in the public sector, if you're publicly funded in terms of what you do. But actually, it can be quite ingrained. It's a difficult thing. So I think that's one of the enduring reasons why interpretation, which at its most basic is writing labels, is so hard. I think it's really difficult to forget your education, to forget what it's like not to know stuff. It's difficult to put yourself in the position of someone who isn't specially educated, but who might be interested, and of trying to imagine what questions they might have and what would be the most clear way of answering those questions in order to give them or enhance for them the experience that they have if they're going into an art event or a museum. So that's you know, it's the way it is, isn't it? I think it's something about we have to be aware of our bubble and keep challenging ourselves to think beyond that. And whenever I do these talks, people say, yes, we understand the problems because we're all struggling with the problems. That's what we do every day. What are the solutions? How do you write good labels? How do you write good wall text? How do you write good information? And I always say, as I have said today, there isn't one single way of doing it, but there are some basic principles which I would like to share with you. And I'm also very much aware that English is perhaps not for most of you, it isn't your first language, and maybe it isn't even your second. So I've kept these principles applicable to writing in general, whatever language. So here's my advice, which I hope you'll find at least some of it useful at some point. So in terms of content, ask yourself, what is important about this work or this installation or this exhibition or this event? And I think it's good if you can try and limit yourself to not try and say absolutely everything, as Martina was talking about this morning. There's so much you can say. Limit yourself to I would say, the three most important things. And if you haven't got space for three most important things, the two most important things. And that can be your first layer of interpretation. The thing that the reader has to know, the uninformed reader, what's going to be most interesting to them, most important for them. And I'd say that's really important for your wall panel when you go into the exhibition, which is usually longer. And it's your first layer of interpretation. And then ask yourself for specific objects or specific works, what does the reader need to know very specifically about this work? And to me, that's the so what question. Okay? Why have I put this work in the exhibition? What is it doing here? How is it justifying its place in this exhibition? That's what you want to tell people as succinctly as possible. And then, another slide. Really important, what doesn't the reader need to know? Okay, it's just as important because, again, someone's coming to visit something, they've only got so much headspace. You want to use their attention as efficiently as possible. So you want to not give them information that's just clogging up their head and they're going to forget instantly because it's not important. So again, and also people are visiting perhaps for many different reasons, but they probably want to be educated a bit, but then, you know, they're not on a crash course in modern art or crash course in, I don't know, early 20th century religious icons or something like this. And they probably want to enjoy their experience. So, and I think that's just important, you know. Inform and entertain, I think, is quite useful kind of philosophy. And I think, I know because you will all say, but we have so many different audiences coming to visit, and some of them will be students who do want more depth. And I would just say, you know what, it's the university's job to do the heavy lifting there, not yours. You've got, I think your priority is for a more general audience or possibly specific audiences depending on your exhibition. This is just a really practical tip. Would you go to this exhibition or this event or this conference having read this information? So those of you who are writing for the public and it's going to go outside of your institution, your marketing, or those of you who have the last word in it, or you're the director or the head of department, that's a good question to ask yourself. And I think it's also, as a useful thing, is maybe to ask someone, your husband, your wife, your children, your aunt, your friends, whatever, who are not professionals, what they think of it as well before you go to press or before it leaves your institution. It's a simple thing, but it can help. It can throw something up that you hadn't, you know, it can confirm to you, this is really good copy, or, that word isn't right, or this phrase isn't right. And again, if it's yes, if the answer is, this is really good writing, think about, do a bit more analysis. What is it that attracts you to go to this exhibition? What do you think makes it good writing? And then ask yourself, have I emphasised this aspect enough? Can I make even more of it? And if the answer is no, then analyse why not. What is it about what you've written that maybe doesn't quite really nail it? Because it's quite easy, by the way, to do adequate writing. It's quite hard to know sometimes the difference between excellent writing and good enough writing. And it's good to aim for excellent writing, I think, if you can. I am reaching the end, I promise. So now about technique, writing technique. It's kind of often assumed, I think, that curators and other professionals can write well. You know, it's assumed maybe that because it's your job you can do it, but actually quite often people are not trained in how to do it. It's just almost a sub part of the job. Actually, it's quite hard to do it with some skill, and not everyone can do it. It's not actually that easy to get difficult ideas across in simple language. I think it takes quite a lot of practice and quite a lot of awareness of technique. And this, I think, is the single most important tip I can give you. Have I used any words that require specialist knowledge to understand, like contemporaneity and things like that? If there's a simpler word or phrase, use it. Actually, although some of you said you're impressed by long words, if you think about it, it's not really that impressive. You know, it's just ego. So, you know, use a simple word. George Orwell always said, you know, if there's a simpler way of saying it, say it simpler. And editors on newspapers and magazines will always cross out the long word and put the simpler word in. So you should do that for yourself. And if there isn't a simpler word, explain in simple language what that word or phrase means. Okay? Every profession has its own professional language. It's not that you can't have professional language, that there isn't a depth of thought and learning, but you might need to explain it, and that's fine. Long sentences, okay. I enjoyed writing this one. Always have a look. It's really easy to write long sentences and not realise that you've done it. So just have a quick look at whether you've written long sentences. We do it a lot when we talk. You can hear I use long sentences. So I've just done this nice little bit about short sentences work much better. Limit yourself to one idea per sentence. You can still include caveats and explanations. You can still say this idea is complicated by the politics of the time or social customs, for example, or that this installation shows the social expectations of the time, while also criticising some aspects. I've used short sentences there, but you still get the meaning, I think, I hope. Yeah? Okay. This is very personal to me. Some of you might argue with this one, but I love this one. This is my own personal philosophy, although you might think I don't act it out very well, given this talk. Have I said what I mean to say in as few words as possible? Be precise with your language. Use as few words as possible, but be precise in the words that you choose. Make sure that what you've said is relevant and is worth saying, is what the reader wants to know. And if it isn't, take it out. Edit, edit, edit. People have jobs as editors. There are full-time editorial positions. It's a proper job. Actually, if you're a writer, it's only half the skill, in a sense. The other half is being able to edit, and being able to edit your own work is really hard because you think what you've written is brilliant. And it's really important to be able to edit your own work, or if you can't do that, to have someone who can do it for you. Thank you. I do have one final one. Avoid rhetoric, persiflage, and waffle. I am enacting it. There you go. Thank you very much. I hope that's been useful to you, and entertaining and informative. And I think we now possibly have some time for questions. Yeah.
Dany, for your presentation. Uma apresentação que nos levanta imensas questões e podemos conversar ainda uns minutos sobre ela. Mas, em primeiro lugar, eu queria reforçar o que a Dany já disse. Ela trouxe-nos alguns exemplares que vão estar à venda ali fora, no átrio, com um desconto. Vão estar a 10 € cada. The Interpretation Matters Handbook, que é o livro da Dany. Portanto, quem quiser... ela só trouxe 10, mas quem quiser depois pode encomendar, que a Dany diz que manda pelo correio, claro, com os postos, com o custo do correio, mas pode enviar. Eu gostaria de, antes de passar a palavra para esse lado, fazer uma breve consideração ou um breve desafio à Dany sobre a sua apresentação, que foi muito interessante. Do meu ponto de vista, faltou-me aqui ver o que é que a Dany considera uma boa tabela, ou ter trazido um exemplo de uma boa tabela, porque acho que também aprendemos todos com isso, para perceber, porque normalmente falamos sempre pela negativa, e eu acho que aprendemos também muito a ver o que é que quem sabe fazer considera uma boa tabela. Gostaria muito de ter visto na apresentação. Depois, outra questão que me parece importante e perguntar-lhe, e é uma pergunta que lhe lanço, é esta questão de escrever e de escrever para todos. Se fez, em alguns destes sítios que considera que não tem uma escrita ainda adequada para todos, algum tipo de exercício com o público real e juntou o público real com os investigadores para que eles possam perceber a dificuldade de passar a mensagem. Porque normalmente nós vivemos em comunidades fechadas onde todos sabemos e sabemos o que estamos a dizer e nos conhecemos, o tal jargão que existe em todas as profissões, mas depois os comissários e mesmo os artistas não têm o contacto suficiente com o público. Se tem alguma experiência desse tipo e em que medida é que isso transformou a instituição e que a instituição se transformou também depois dessa experiência?
Thank you. Can you hear me now? Oh, yes. Should I have a...
micro, sorry. Yeah, where is it?
Thank you. I was just flicking through this book because I do put some examples of good writing in here, and you're completely right. I should have had some on the slides. Apologies. I use the example of Martin Creed and his exhibition at the Hayward Gallery on the South Bank in London as some of the best interpretation I've seen, or some of the best labels that I've seen, in terms of being understandable and funny and communicating with ease, actually. And sorry, I it's a good tip again for the next time I do one of these, is to actually put some slides of good writing up. It's actually easier and more funny and entertaining to talk about bad writing than to give you the examples of good writing, because you just go, yeah, okay. And the other example I always cite is labels written by Grayson Perry, the artist, at his exhibition Tomb of Unknown Craftsmen at the British Museum, which I think was maybe 2012, 2013 now. And I think that was brilliant, and I think it was brilliant because it was Grayson Perry. He knows how to communicate, and he's a fantastic communicator, but a fantastic storyteller, and that's what he did with his labels. He told the story in the objects from the British Museum collection, but he also told the story, he enhanced the story in words and in the objects he made based on that British Museum collection. And it's still to this day the best interpretation I've ever seen, because it was like three strands. It wasn't just here's a label explaining the work, it was a labeling. Oh, sorry, people are telling me they can't hear. But it's the best. It was a third. The labels was a third strand to the experience. You know, it was brilliant. But that's because he's Grayson Perry, and it's his particular personality. And of course, we're not all like that. And I think institutions particularly struggle to. Oh, are people saying they can't hear?
Well, you need to point a micro with the mic better to you, like this. Yeah.
Like that? Yeah. Ah, sorry. Because I can hear. Have you heard any of that, or have I just been? Yes. Okay, sorry. Because I can hear it perfectly with the head. Oh, sorry, I can hear it perfectly with the headphones. Apologies. Anyway, in brief, example in here: Martin Creed at Hayward and Grayson Perry. But also, I recognise that institutions have an issue because they often have their own guidelines that the people who are doing the writing have to conform to. So, like Martina was saying this morning, we have to have 60 words on a label, whether the object needs more than 60 words or less. When Dr. Penelope Curtis was director of Tate Britain, she said when she arrived, every label had to be 200 words for the same reason, but that was something she was able to change, and she instituted a policy whereby curators were empowered to write as much or as little as they thought the work required. So I hope that answers the first part of your question. And the second part about contact with the public, yes, for this book, I did actually go to museums and galleries and actually accost people, poor unsuspecting visitors and say, what do you think of these labels then? And recorded their answer, and some of those answers are in here. And I also had willing volunteers around the country who went into other institutions and did the same thing and sent the recordings to me, and then I've reproduced the ones that I think are most useful in this book. And also, as part of this project, I have worked with institutions on how they produce their writing for public, for the public. So I worked with a gallery called the Delaware Pavilion on the South Coast, and I worked. I call it a workshop program with other bits in between and a lot of analysis and reporting and the organisation agreeing to actions and things like that. But we looked at the process that the staff used, and that was everyone from front of house to the director, and it was a long process and quite an enlightening one. But the other part of that was to actually test their labelling and their the information that they have, including their web information, with members of the public, and to feed that back as well. So yes, in other words, I have had quite a lot of contact with the public, and I am a member of the public, or I have a foot in both camps. But actually, you're right, many institutions don't, and that's why as part of this project, I made that facility available, that they could test what they do as part of a process, if they're willing to go through that process.
Thank you. Eu passo já a palavra para aí. Tinha aqui várias questões, mas se não houver nenhuma questão, depois ainda faço mais uma ou outra questão à Dany, mas gostava de vos ouvir. Até porque temos mais 10 minutos. Nenhuma questão? Rita.
I have read somewhere, I'm not sure if it's true, but most of the museums in the UK have a department of interpretation, right? Am I right, wrong?
The bigger institutions do.
They do.
Many, you have to be of a certain size, I think. The bigger ones, I suppose, are in the minority. They're London-based. There's maybe 2 or 3 in the in each region, but I would say the vast majority of museums and galleries don't.
And my question is, that department works in the interpretation of texts, labels, and so on. That's what they do.
Yes.
And they, because my experience in museums in the UK is, especially in London, some of the labels and the texts are very good.
Yeah.
And they relate to you personally.
Yes.
So all the things you said at the end of what makes a good label and a good text, they usually do it. And having a department, having a lot of people working in that direction, it helps, I assume.
You can argue everything one way or the other, can't you? And I can't speak for every department. But I think if the department runs well and there's a good vision in the institution, then I would like to think, yes, it does work well. I know for myself, when I go to museums particularly, I can be quite unhappy with how simplified the labels are. And actually, I was having a chat over lunch about the British Museum and the V&A, where with their permanent collection, they're often, particularly what I rudely call their antiquities looted from around the world during colonial times. The labelling is atrocious, I think, because it doesn't acknowledge where the provenance of the objects. But the counter argument is that sometimes when labels are done by committee, when there's too many people involved, actually that it can become a bit bloodless and a bit unexciting, because the education department say, you can't say this because no one will understand it, and the marketing department say, well, you've got to give it a bit of buzz and relate it to something that someone can relate to in popular culture. And the curator will say, but we can't dumb it down, we've got to have some intellectual and academic knowledge, or we look stupid, and it all becomes a bit of a compromise. So I think it can go in different ways, and perhaps it's to do with, I think it's a good thing to have, but I also think it would depend very much on the department and the people within the department and the leadership of the department and the institution.
Temos só tempo para mais uma questão, se houver. Alguma questão ali?
Sense of what it's about. So that's why I think writing for performance is easier, because you can do that. And it's accepted and people are used to it. Readers are used to gauging performance based on 3 or 4 sentences that can be a bit vague and thematic, rather than necessarily very concrete, which I think in other forms you have to be perhaps a bit more.
Muito obrigada, Dany Louise, pela apresentação, pelo Keynote Speech. Eu gostaria só de terminar, já que sou uma mulher que venho do Sul, diria que a Dany Louise nos trouxe aqui uma apresentação que podemos resumir a dizer que nos veio ensinar ou recordar a escrever com 3 letrinhas apenas: Sun, Simply, Useful and Needed. É isto que eu acho que podemos ficar com a apresentação da Dany, que nos trouxe aqui uma maneira, ou a maneira de usar a língua de forma precisa e sabermos passar a mensagem de uma forma correta e, acima de tudo, que essa mensagem tenha relevância, porque isso é muito importante, relevância para os outros e não apenas para nós que estamos na área, ou que não façamos apenas para os nossos pares, mas façamos para o público em geral. Muito obrigada, Dany, pelo seu excelente contributo nesta nossa conferência anual.